And I can recall being on a craft in a soul state. So I was a ball of light, but if I can put it this way, I could see everything around me and I knew what was going on. I could hear the meeting, if I can put it that way, that I was attending with other humans and some of the greys. So there were other balls of light there. So this is consciousness itself, in that I was a ball of light. I didn't have eyes or ears or a mouth or whatever, but I was totally aware of what was taking place and absorbing it and listening, and then left in that same form and returned to the body. And we all do that on a nightly basis, probably anyway, leaving our body and going and doing other things.
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Hello. We are live. Live on Facebook. This is going to be a great discussion. You know, I listened to your radio spaced out or radio out there or whatever it was that you posted up yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it, actually. I thought the guy was great. I was thinking, oh, you've shared it. Good on you. I was thinking he was like, oh, so you've spotted lights in the sky at the beginning. And I'm like, he has no idea who he's talking to. he has no idea who he's talking to.
Radio, yes, sorry, I thought you were referring to Yannick's interview, but yes, Spaced Out Radio.
Spaced Out Radio.
Quite a long interview.
It was good. I didn't listen to all of it. I skipped most of the beginning because I thought he's going to talk about lights in the sky and he has no idea who he's got on the end of his phone. And so I skipped about, 40 minutes of it. And then you started revealing some of who you are. And he was like, what? Tell me more about that. All right. Well, let me, 7 people watching. I don't know who's watching. Hello, who's ever watching? Let me introduce you. Suzy Hansen, welcome to Facebook Live with Karen.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you very much.
Now, Suzy's in New Zealand. Suzy is the author of The Dual Soul Connection, the Alien Agenda for Human Advancements, with contributions by your friend, Dr. Rudy Shields, who was professor of astrophysics at Harvard-Smithsonian Center, Astrophysics in Cambridge, USA. It says here the mother of 2 sons, was a teacher for 28 years, school teacher, and you've been a researcher, an investigator, an author in the UFO field for over 40 years, director of UFocus NZ. Now, where are you in New Zealand? Are you in Wellington, Auckland, South?
No, I'm in Tauranga, east coast of the North Island, about 2 hours south of Auckland.
Oh, right up there. Oh, beautiful. Oh, it's beautiful up there. Anyway, and Suzy and I have done a couple of shows together. So if you want to know more about Suzy, you can go to her website, which is, let me have a look. What's your website? Let me have a look here. ufocusnz.org.nz or communicatorlink.com. And you've got a YouTube.
Being redone at the moment. So
are they?
I've got to get on them, yeah.
But what I wanted to talk to you about, Suzy, with what's happening in our world is the 3 waves of volunteers, because you and I had a great discussion on the show about the 3 waves of volunteers, which are star beings, if you like, or beings that have mostly, souls that have mostly incarnated into different realities, call them ET realities or alien realities or extra dimensional, but they've been hanging out in different realities where contrast isn't as broad as here on Earth, and so fear and hate and all that thing, they don't sort of buy into all that. They feel much more unified. They know their connection to the Creator. They know that they're all united. And so they volunteered to come to Earth to help humanity find that same understanding. And I'm thinking that at the moment, with what's going on in our world, one of the things that you said was when things get really rough on planet Earth, that those third waves of volunteers, that third wave will be in place to sort of implement what they need to do. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? We'll just go over briefly the three waves of volunteers and from your perspective.
Well, firstly, I think I just want to address the bit you said first, Karen. We are, from my perspective, we are all universal souls, and I think this is where some people get hung up on the idea that we're human souls. We're universal souls that have chosen to incarnate in a human body. So essentially, all of us here have been elsewhere, maybe many lives on Earth too, but all of us have been elsewhere at some time or other.
Yep.
It's just that leading up to this difficult time, over 100 years ago, the realization that we were going to go down a bad track, and don't ask me how these things are predicted, but they are. I've seen it happen many times on board craft. And so this insurance policy, if I can put it that way, of the third waves was formulated in conjunction with ET species and the spiritual hierarchy of our planet that oversees souls incarnating here. So I guess in some ways many souls were offered the opportunity to come here, and some of them took it up, and some of them have lived previous lives here, but many of them have not. They've lived previous lives elsewhere. And so some of those souls incarnating here have brought memory of those civilizations or previous lives that they've had. And they're utilizing that knowledge and understanding and wisdom in this life. So just briefly going over the three waves, which I learnt about first when I was 8 years old on board craft, and then over the years this was reinforced and expanded along with groups of other humans that I was with on craft who were part of these education programs being run with humans to prepare us for these times that we're in now and that we will be in the future, and our various tasks that we as souls have agreed to carry out on this planet. And some of those will be personal tasks for our own soul growth, but others will be in assistance on a planet. And these souls who've incarnated in these three waves, or these three structured incoming of souls, have had a lot of preparatory time in what we might call the great field of consciousness. So they haven't just suddenly incarnated here. There's been this interim time up there, wherever they are in whatever dimensional state, and they have prepared and become informed about what is going to happen and what they're likely to face in their life. And again, as an 8-year-old, I was shown this on board craft, where I was shown a number of souls who would be a part of my life and assist me in various things that I had to do. So all of the three waves, as it was explained to me throughout my life, were divided into two groups, and one group would incarnate sooner in the first and second waves, and one group would incarnate a bit later, but they still belong to that one group. So for example, if we've got the first wave, which if you wanted to have a motto for that group, it would be challenging the norm. And the first ones in that group, the innovators, they incarnated back in like 1890, 1850, right through to the 1930s. And so they were very much part of the inventors and the early spiritualist groups, the early psychic groups that were working all around the world. And they had new ideas. They were part of the new technology that would come in the future. They were part of the inventors and the innovators of that. But the second part of that group, that are the enlighteners, they are what many people call the star kids, the indigo kids, etc. And there's quite a few researchers out there saying that this particular group is the one that's going to lead us into the future. But from my own perspective and experience and what I have been told, this isn't the case. They are a smaller group within the first wave that are here to teach us what we are capable of, to show us the kind of psychic and kinetic abilities that one can have and utilize in life. They're very much free-spirited. Most of those souls have come straight from lives on other planets, and they're bringing that knowledge and that understanding with them. Most of them are quite sensitive, and they get into art and music and all of those creative expression kind of things that we appreciate on this planet. So they are very much tied into what you might call a New Age movement, which was a bit earlier. But they have the very much interest in healing and the environment, etc. So very environmentally aware.
Yeah.
And they are here to alter our perception of psychic things and the potential of humanity, of what we can do with our consciousness. And they have been used to doing that in other places, so they can exhibit that. And
many people, sorry, Suzy, and many people that are watching this or listening to this will recognise themselves as those souls.
Yes, and they are sort of paving the way for the next wave. And again, the second wave is broken into two parts, and they pave the way. The star kids, if you want to call them that, label them that, are emerged around about the same time as the second group in the second wave, called the communicators. So they supported what the communicators were saying. So if we want to look at the second wave, it started very much with the pioneers, that part of that group. And so they were the early people talking about UFO sightings in terms of flying saucers, etc., and contact with the very human-looking, loving entities who would come down, presumably from places like Venus, as those were some of the things that were named. As to whether that's fact or not, but these were the stories coming out at that time of loving, positive contacts. And many of these people faced huge ridicule and derision, but many of them became oracles and public speakers and drew a lot of the public to their meetings. So back in those days, in the 60s, 50s, 60s, and early 70s, you had huge meetings, particularly in the States and Europe, of these kinds of people who belonged to that group of the early pioneers of the second wave, bringing in that awareness that we aren't alone in the cosmos. And then later on, we had the group that I consider that I'm in, and that is the communicators, and that's the second part of the second wave. And these came in around about the 50s and 60s. I was born in 54. And that group is largely, not all the group is this, but they are largely the abductees and experiencers, a massive, massive group worldwide of people who had that face-to-face contact with ET. And again, like the pioneers of that group, they have faced a lot of ridicule and derision, and particularly the abductees coming out in the 70s and 80s, talking about their contacts with the greys and other species. They faced a lot of ridicule and examination. And then, of course, the experiencer group, who felt that their experiences were more loving and positive, broke away from that group and chose to call themselves experiencers. So this particular group that I consider that I'm in, the communicators, many of them have made, documentaries, run UFO groups, really publicised the subject out there, no matter what the response to it. And
okay, we're live again. So we're live again. I think we lost a few viewers, but we're back on live. So we're live now. If you go to my profile.
Okay.
Sorry. Right, there we go. Let me turn that off. Okay, so we were on the second wave, the second part of the second wave, which are the communicators. So take it from where we were before. You said you're a part of the second wave, which are the communicators. So people that have had experiences I think communicators are not just ET experiences, but all types of experiences, out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, and they're communicating what they've experienced and they're enlightening humanity through their experiences. Is that right? Do you want to go into that a bit more?
More specifically in this group, it's communicating about UFO stuff. I mean, I think some of those people talking about out-of-body experiences and other modalities may well be part of the first wave, the younger members of the first wave. But yes, the communicators really have a hard task in the whole of the second wave, because one of the things that we have had to face is ridicule and derision as we come out with our experiences. And in the book, I predicted that in the future, within the 10 years of my book coming out, there would be a lot of people coming forward with their experiences, and they would be, you know, well-respected community members, grandmothers, aunties, uncles, etc. And it would get to the stage where you've got a critical mass of people saying, this has happened to me. And certainly I'm seeing that now. A lot of the communications I get are from the older age group saying, look, this happened to me. I haven't told a soul, but I want to tell someone now. I just feel this real urge and push to do that. So we are seeing a lot of this happening, and more people coming out of the closet about their experiences.
Out of the closet. I know, exactly. And they're all in these, you know, conferences that you go and speak at. They're all coming. Look, one of those people that I identified, I don't know if you've met him, Kevin Briggs. Have you met Kevin? I had him on the show. He's an English guy. He lives in Florida now. He was a policeman, but he, from the early age, like about 8 or 9, had full contact with his galactic team. He has a bit of a team. One is a grey, one's a mantid, one's he calls Anunnaki, one is like a bird-like being. So there's about 8 of them, Galactic Council, and he's had full contact with them all his life. But he's in his 60s now, and he said, he's got this fabulous English accent. He said, you know, Karen, I was going to go to my grave and never tell a soul. and then the guide said to him, only a couple of years ago, you need to write about what you've experienced. And he's like, oh, I don't know how to write. And they said, we'll help you. And now he's out there speaking about it. But it's only been 2 years. All his life he had these amazing experiences up on ships, and he was going to go to his grave and never tell anybody until the guide said to him, time for you to talk.
Yes, and Karen, it doesn't just cover experiences. I mean, I get a lot of, I'm a sighting investigator as well in New Zealand, and I get a lot of people coming and wanting to talk about their sighting experiences. And just last week, I had a lady in her 70s ring me and say, look, my husband and I had this stunning sighting years ago. We got up close to a craft, and I've never told anyone about it. We made a pact that we wouldn't, because we didn't want our family to suffer and we didn't want to be ridiculed.
Exactly.
And she said, my husband now has Alzheimer's and I have ill health, and I want to tell someone about this before I go or before I lose the ability to tell anyone. So I think it's right across the board with sightings. And of course, many people who have had sightings but don't ever remember their contact, because sightings often lead to contact. They have led lives where they've done quite extraordinary things, even if it's just being a super person and helping so many other people along the way. And maybe that was their task, and they've been doing it all their life and they just didn't realise.
Well, I had a client yesterday who's a teacher. She wants to retire. She was a school teacher all her life. And we were talking about her guidance. It was, you know, we kind of got her connected to her team. But then at the end she said, do I have any galactic, you know, connections? She said, it's nothing I've ever thought about all my life until I started watching your shows. And like you said at the beginning of this, the guidance came through was, well, every human being on the planet has had these galactic interactions. Because as you say, this Earth school, this Earth experience is a tough place, and most souls elect to experience density in a different form before they even hope to come to Earth, and call that other planets or other dimensions or whatever you want to call that. But everybody has galactic roots, if you like, or galactic guides or galactic lives, or so. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that we think that it's so strange, and yet everybody would at one stage in their soul's evolution experienced that. So anyway, please go on.
Right, yeah. And I think the thing that comes through with the second wave is that they're the ones who are more likely to come up to you at a conference or write to you and say, I feel really frustrated because I know there's something I have to do in my life, but I don't know what it is, but I've got this really urgent feeling I have to start doing it soon. Can you tell me what it might be?
That's exactly what she said to me. She said, I feel like I need to do something. I've been a school teacher all my life, but I feel like there's something else I need to do. Yeah.
And this is this convergence that I'm talking about, where people are starting to realize, hey, there's more to me and there's more to everything around me than I suspected. And I've got this push to find out what it is. And then people go on this path of discovery, and then their task or whatever it is that they need to do starts to unfold. And they have the confidence then, if they've had experiences, to begin talking about them. But that you have to have that confidence first, otherwise it can sometimes end in disaster, as many people who've gone public can tell you. And often I say to people, give it huge consideration before you go public, because if you now understand what your task is and what you need to do, is it really necessary to shout it from the rooftops and tell everyone? You can just do it. You know, just there's lots of people who are just doing it quietly and doing wonderful, wonderful things without ever coming out. But the fact that many are going to come out is going to be the thing that changes public perception in the long run, and it will take time.
Well, it is the thing that's changing public perception. You know, just the statistics. Like you go to you contact in the desert and there's 5,500 people that are turning up. It's like 5,500 people turning up to a UFO conference. Something's going on, right? So it is changing public perception. But it is this third wave that you spoke about on the show with me that I've really been thinking about lately, because you said that they're not necessarily the healers or the psychics or even the communicators or the experiencers. They're people in society. They're doctors and lawyers and politicians and nurses and mums and dads and all these people, but they seem to be connected to a knowing. And you said that when, I'm using my vernacular, but when the shift hits the fan, you know, when we kind of get into these intense times on Earth that you were shown even as a child from your ET family, these people are in place and they will know exactly what to do so that we don't kind of fall down a hole sort of thing. And do you want to talk a little bit about them?
Well, the third wave, I remember being told even as a child that they were the concealed ones. And in my book, I write about meeting the soul of my future son on a craft and being told all about the group that he would be in, this third wave, that they would be concealed for a reason. One, and it's mainly a protective reason. Many of them will need to be in positions in business and in medicine and in quite high, businesses across the world. So we're talking about monetary stuff as well, but businesses that also cater for the populace of humanity in very large ways. Yeah. So they are going to be the game changers of the future, and they're being kept quiet or concealed so that they are not targeted, but also so that they can just lead very normal lives. Because often we see the star kids, etc., they are showcased in many ways. We see researchers showcasing them. We see, other groups, New Age groups, and that showcasing them. And that's okay, that's good. That's what they're here for, to show people what they can do. But if we had the people who really are at the core of this whole program, the 3 programs, it's the third wavers. It's not the star kids and all of those groups. It's the third wavers, because they have been given massive education on board craft and massive education as a soul before they even incarnated to this world. Yeah. And then as a human and a young child, they've been taken on board craft, as I was and as many communicators were, and given an education as a human. But I was told when I was in my 30s that they would have a much vaster education than what we have had.
Right.
It would be unbelievably vast, but they would not recall it. So they would be like many early abductees who had no recollection but knew something had happened to them and were traumatized by something that they didn't understand. But these guys go on board and have done all their young lives, because they're now pretty much in their 30s and early 40s, but still coming in, still being born into it. But those who are ready to start work are in that age group. And as they assist us through the difficult times on a planet and get older, then these younger ones who are in the third wave coming through will pick up where they leave off. So it's all quite beautifully planned.
It is.
The groups.
Yeah.
If we
There's a few people asking things here, so I'm just going to. I've lost it. Where are they? Sorry. There's lots of people asking questions. That makes sense. I do feel drawn to do something, but I'm not sure what. I'm in the medical field, Alison says, and she also says, can we be part of one of the waves and not necessarily have contact, aside from one time when I was young, when I was pretty sure that I saw some craft. I asked for contact. Oh, gee, I've lost it. Hang on, how do I find the... I keep losing the stream of questions. Oh, okay. My 4-year-old is such an old soul, so connected to nature and loving. She blows me away with her insights sometimes. The children are coming in are amazing. So I just have to get a grapple on these questions. I keep losing them. Anyway, go on. I don't think that's any question.
Well, just answering the first question that you mentioned, you can, if you're in the second wave, which is where the communicators are, then and the pioneers, then you will have had contact, but you may not necessarily remember it. As I said, a lot of the second wavers are starting to come out now, starting to recall, starting to question things that happened in their childhood or throughout their lives, and they're beginning to examine it in the light of possible contact, and they're beginning to realise that that's likely what has happened. But, you know, there will be some, the third wave, for example, aren't likely to remember their contact until just prior to them going out and doing what they've come here to do. So they're very concealed up until that point. And if we think that what the star kids and members of the first wave can offer in terms of psychic ability, the third wavers have had far more experience at it than that. And but they keep it under wraps. So throughout their lives, they have used those abilities in a very quiet way, so that most people see them as people who are trustworthy, have good insight, are quite intuitive without calling it psychic skills, but very insightful people, very wise, very careful, very analytical, and very compassionate. We don't always put analytical and compassionate together, but this is the real hallmark of these young people, is that they are very analytical, but they have that compassion that backs it up.
Absolutely.
And so I've called them the game changers, because really that's what they're going to do. They're going to come in at times of extreme problems and trauma on the planet, and they're going to step up and they're going to know what to do. The old the thought seeds will start opening up in the mind that have been put there by the ETs when they've been on board craft, right. And they will know exactly what to do and how to handle things. And they'll be right across the board, not just in professions, but in all walks of life. There'll be these people who can lead others, become superb leaders and practical leaders. And if we look around the world today, and I'm not saying that these people are necessarily third wavers, but if we look around the world today, we can see that there are now some prime ministers and leaders of countries who are very young. They're in their 30s, late 30s, mid to late 30s and early 40s. So we are seeing examples of that age group that are coming to the fore, whereas in the past we've had very much the older age group leading countries. And we're now having very much younger people who are coming up to this task and doing a brilliant job of it.
Yeah, well, you're Prime Minister. She's doing a brilliant job, isn't she? What do you think about her? How old is she? She's in her 40s, isn't she?
She's 39, yeah.
Oh,
She's
wow,
doing
she's
a
39.
brilliant job. But there are others like, the Prime Minister of Finland and
Yep.
other countries as well.
Canada. Okay, so hello from Sweden. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Hakan. Anyway.
Hakan.
Hakan. It is true that contacts are being more and more common now, and the last weeks or so, I imagine. Yannick, same here. When I was in a relationship in 2007, my girlfriend at the time wanted children, but the voice in me was saying that if I did, I wouldn't be able to do what I had to do. This was years before I knew about ETs. Isn't that interesting? No questions. They're just people commenting.
That's
Can
great.
we be part of... no, I think I asked that question. Anyway, keep your questions coming. I found out how to see them all now. I was only getting kind of some of them, but I've changed the view. So this third wave, the game changers. Yes, we're going to. They're going to be more. I've been thinking about it lately. Doctors, and as the restrictions on humanity are getting tighter and tighter, there are going to be people in place that will know what to do inside that. You know, the lockdowns and the they're talking about mandatory vaccinations and.
But I also think, Karen, that that really we're at the very beginning, and I don't want to be pessimistic or negative.
I agree with you.
But I think, yeah, we're at the very beginning, and we're going to see extreme weather, which we know about already, and lots of earth changes, which we know about, but they may be much worse than we've ever seen before. But I think the complicating factor, and we have seen a little bit of this with what's happened in Kiribati in the Pacific Islands recently, is that you'll have two things hitting at once or three things hitting at once. So in Kiribati, they've had a cyclone go through, but they've also had the first cases of the virus. So their homes have been blown to smithereens. There's a shortage of water and food and medical supplies and all that kind of thing, and they've got the virus there as well. So when we get these complicated situations where more than one tragedy is happening at one time, that's when you have the humanitarian aid groups being overwhelmed. And back in the 80s and 90s, groups of humans that I was with on board craft being lectured to by the ETs talked about this. They said that humanitarian aid groups, as wonderful as they are, will come to the point where they can no longer function because there'll be geopolitical borders, there'll be, every kind of border put up, as we're seeing with the pandemic. And if something happens within a country that's in lockdown or whatever, it's going to be difficult for groups to get through to deliver that aid. So really, it's up to us as individuals, as families, communities, and wider in our country to prepare ourselves for these things and to have planning in place. And I think that is also where a lot of these third wavers will come to the fore in their spectacular skills at analysis and being able to see the bigger picture and be able to take action that's appropriate and not focusing on the smaller matters, but the bigger picture.
The bigger picture. So you're saying that many or most of the third wavers have no conscious memory of who they are and their extra dimensional education, and as life gets more intense on planet Earth, they'll just start to remember and they'll know exactly what to do. Kristen here says Northern Utah also had an earthquake, and the virus south of the US had horrible tornadoes recently.
Yes.
Alison says, are ETs working to help heal us, or is it just something that needs to run its course? I suppose you're talking about the virus, Alison. What do you think?
Well, as from the point of view of a school teacher, I'll put it in these terms, at the risk of being called a school teacher. I think that if you spoon feed children at school and you make it easy for them, and you do all the rote learning kind of stuff, which has its place, but if you're spoon feeding children, they don't learn for themselves. They don't have that tenacity to be able to face problems and problem solve. If a child learns through experimentation and through hard work and endeavour and inquiry, then you'll have a child that has learned something for life. And I think we're at the point where we've got to the stage where we've turned away assistance of various sorts, I think, for a very long time. You know, we hear a lot of people talking about how offers have been made over the decades by ET and others, and but we're quite independent, and the ETs consider us quite fickle in our decision making. So really we have to pull ourselves out of this. They have already helped us with the establishment of these 3 waves and these education programs where they take many humans who are not part of the 3 waves on board craft and educate them, assist them, inform them, and they don't always remember that, but it comes out in the work that they're doing. Right. So I think that they've already helped us tremendously, and if we can't put ourselves together, as Michio Kaku, the theoretical physicist, has said, you know, in the stages of becoming a cosmic civilization, we haven't even reached stage 1, which is some kind of unity of purpose and unity of human rights and unity of human dignity. Yeah. So we haven't reached stage 1 yet. So we really need to get our act together and fast.
We really need to get our act together and fast. Well, yes, I agree. You know, I had a beautiful conversation on the show this week with Aaron Abke, lovely young, beautiful spiritual teacher. He grew up as a pastor's son and kind of left the church to expand his knowledge, and now he's out there. God, he's just doing so well. And he was talking about the law of one material and saying that in 2012 we entered this 4th density from 3rd to 4th density, where 4th density is much more about unity and love and cooperation and compassion and kindness. And he said that this event that we're going through, called the coronavirus, is a unifying event, just like the internet was a unifying event. And you look, I've been talking about this on Facebook and on the show. You look at what's happening to our world. It's not happening to one country or few countries. It's happening to us globally. And so, be it good or bad, it is a unifying event. And I think that as we feel more unified as a humanity, you know, going through our trauma, it's bringing us together to be more cooperative and work together. Yeah.
I agree with that. There are some dangers in that, as some people have pointed out, there could be things imposed upon us in that unity. But I think it's time for people to start speaking out more. I mean, we can take the easy road, and we're all guilty of that at times, taking the easy road rather than standing up for what is right. But I think people are beginning to do that more. And one thing that I have noticed, Karen, all over the internet, as sad and tragic as it may be, is that people are commenting about the way animals are treated worldwide. And I think over the last couple of years in particular, there's been a huge upswing in the realization that they are part of our reality, they are part of our environment, they are absolutely necessary to us. And in one of the lectures I attended on a craft years ago, the ETs talked about this connectiveness with animals, that we are losing species. They have taken samples, if I want to put it that way, of species which they have on craft, but and genetic studies, but we're beginning to understand how important they are to our well-being. And more people, I'm an animal lover, and more people are realising that this is part of the whole awakening too. This just isn't an airy-fairy spiritual thing that we might all go through. This is the whole of life on planet Earth, and it includes the elevation of the well-being of animals under our care as well.
Absolutely, airy-fairy spiritual thing. Look, I'm up for being called airy-fairy spiritual, Suzy. I've been called that all my life. A mung bean. My brother used to call me a mung bean when I was young. Anyway. Kristen says, do we believe we have been progressing too slowly and we are now in need of assistance to progress? If so, why? And not before or later than now. Just curious to what you guided teachers have to say?
Well, on one of the times that I was on craft, we were told that humanity, it was quite embarrassing for us humans actually, really brought home the reality that we are retrograde spiritually. We have not progressed forward as was expected.
Yeah.
We're in many ways going backwards. So we've got very good spirituality in some respects, but really horrendous in others, and I'll include our treatment of animals in that.
Right.
And so they're very concerned that that's happening, and they likened it to a river. And they said that in the middle of a river you've got the channel or a harbour, you've got that free-flowing channel that's deep and it flows really well. But then out to either side you've got the mud flats and you've got the bulrushes with, you know, the potato chip papers caught in it and the old fishing lines and the tyres that someone's thrown into the water. And it's very stagnant. And they said in terms of the universe is the central flow. And we spiritually have moved to the Netherlands. You know, we're in the boondocks in the muddy flats.
Stagnant.
And we really need to get back into that flow, or we will not progress as we should do and could do.
All right. Well, this is a message for anyone that's watching this or listening to this that thinks that they maybe don't want to talk or change their way. You know, I think that it's so important for the people that are awake to start. They don't necessarily have to talk about ETs, but start teaching mindfulness, meditation. Start, you know, like if you've ever thought of changing your career and getting more into that, like this beautiful teacher I was talking to yesterday, she never thought about introducing sort of mindfulness or something into the school curriculum, because there is such a fear of ridicule and, oh, don't that hippie woo-woo stuff, don't bring that stuff into, you know, but we just have to be up for being ridiculed and just do it, because like, as you say, we're kind of stagnant. We've got to get that flow. And when people get more connected to their own heart, yeah, they'll feel more connected to everyone else, including the animals and the trees and the earth, and they won't want to practice the things that they're practicing that are damaging.
Well, I think the ancient people were much more connected to nature than we are now. Scientifically, we may know a lot more about nature than they did, but that connection, everyday connection, has been lost for many of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, has anyone got any questions? There's lots of comments here, but I haven't seen any questions. So we're talking about the third wave of volunteers, and I wanted to talk to Suzy today, who's a dual soul. She's written a book called The Dual Soul Connection, about having galactic roots, or from her galactic perspective, had chosen to come in and have a human life to be a part of the people helping humanity shift in consciousness. And as we've identified, there are literally millions, like probably billions of us here. Pretty much every human on this earth has had some experience on another dimension or another planet. You know, they've played in density in an environment that's not as harsh as the Earth environment, which has polarity, is very exaggerated here. So we all have galactic roots in that respect. We just don't remember them. And we're talking about the third wavers, who are what did you call them again? The unseen ones, the unspoken ones?
The concealed ones.
The concealed ones, yeah.
They're concealed until such time as their time comes to do important tasks.
Yeah.
But I'd just like to comment on the lady from the medical profession you mentioned before, who said that she'd been feeling there was something she needed to do. And I know people who've left the medical profession, not that the medical profession isn't wonderful and doesn't do great things, but had followed their heart into other forms of healing, and utilised their knowledge in that way, with something that was wanting to come out from inside them and do healing in a different way, having had all of that background for many years in a profession behind them. And I know quite a few people who've done that.
Absolutely. Look, I started my path as a healer going into naturopathy and not having any understanding of why I was so passionate about some things and not others. When I was working studying as a naturopathic a doctor, I refused to study chemistry. And my chemistry teacher said, "Why, Karen?" And I said, "I'm not interested in that. I don't think that that's going to help heal people." And she was confused and I was confused. I don't know why I had so much resistance, but found out that in a past life I had been a doctor and really fixed on science and didn't look at the consciousness component, like how our emotions affect our bodies, is our soul plan, who we are as spiritual beings electing to have a physical experience, and what are we choosing, and what's the karma, and all that story, just looking through microscopes, and which is kind of interesting. But from the ET perspective, they have that component completely in place. This is the thing that astounded me with your story, Suzy, that you as a child on ships were communicating with souls, orbs of light, and they were talking about incarnating into a physical body. And so this understanding as who we are as souls is just so normal for them, whereas humans are just trying to wake up. We have a soul, there's life after death, what? Like we're just waking up to that en masse, most of us. Do you want to comment on that?
Yes, and I can recall being on a craft in a soul state. So I was a ball of light, but if I can put it this way, I could see everything around me and I knew what was going on. I could hear the meeting, if I can put it that way, that I was attending with other humans and some of the greys. So there were other balls of light there. So this is consciousness itself, in that I was a ball of light. I didn't have eyes or ears or a mouth or whatever, but I was totally aware of what was taking place and absorbing it and listening, and then left in that same form and returned to the body. And we all do that on a nightly basis, probably anyway, leaving our body and going and doing other things. So it's a natural progression that's going to be a part of what happens on a craft. It's just the difference is that we in our human form every day, we don't see balls of light floating around as well as human bodies. We just see human bodies, but on the craft you can see balls of light that are there, maybe because their time zone on the planet is that they're asleep at that time of night. So they're there as a ball of light and you're in the right time zone and you're there as a human body. I don't know, but this is certainly what many experiencers describe.
Yeah. And
just one issue there that I want to add to do with the third wave is that the communicators, part of the second wave who do a lot of speaking and bring out their experiences, are the parents of the group called the fourth intellect children in the third wave. So there's a very small group of the third wave who were extracted out from childhood because they were very adept at certain skills to do with consciousness and psychic stuff and analytical abilities. They were selected out and became a specific group that would have the dual soul in the same way that their parents have. And the members of the second wave who've had children that are now third wavers are going to play an important part in assisting their children when they come to remember all of their experiences. And I know third wavers are constantly at the moment communicating with me. I've got a long list of people to talk to on Skype who are talking about their experiences. They've read my book. They have minimal memory or no memory, but they feel that they fit into that, and they feel that because of certain things that have happened in their lives, certain things that have led them along certain paths in their lives, and they're beginning to see that it's a very distinct pattern and a very distinct progression. So it's very interesting talking to these young people about it. And then there are some who are beginning to have memories of being taken up through the ceiling or through a door, minimal memories, but believe that this fits what I have described in my book. So we can see these people beginning to emerge now, and they're going to need the help of the second wavers who are in a communicator group to assimilate this quickly into their lives so that they can be effective quickly and not have to go through the years and years of assimilation and ridicule and that their parents or older generation did have to go through as abductees and experience.
Right. So the second waivers, who, as you identified, are the communicators, are really helping the third waivers, as you say, assimilate. As they have more memory, then they watch YouTube videos of people talking about their experience, and that sparks even more memory, and then they start to assimilate. Oh, that's so beautiful. So, and then they've got the psychics and the healers and the indigos that are all on standby to sort of give them psychic readings or healings or activate their light bodies, and it's all working together as this beautiful synergy. It's beautiful.
It's really complex. It's simple but complex.
Yeah.
Because the way the three ways were described to me in childhood and then on into adulthood, how they're divided into two specific groups with specific tasks, and how sometimes the second group of that will work with one of the groups in the next one. Will be actually incarnating at the same time, but in a different group for a different reason. But they are they gel together well and they work together well. Yeah. So I think that, in having said that, some of these third waivers who come out, these what are called the fourth intellect humans, they will get a lot of support from this, what we call the star kids, who are now largely grown up, a lot of them, but although there's still more coming through.
Yeah. But, so I think I've heard you say that some of the third waivers can even be parents that are parenting the more other third waiver children, that their job is the parenting of these children. Is that right?
No, the third wave will continue incarnating into the future, as will some of the first wave, the enlighteners, the star kids. They'll be continue incarnating together.
They'll continue, but what I'm saying is their job is being the parent, like they're...
Yes. No, the other point I was going to make was that the ETs called the third wave the end point children. Not that there would be no more children born, but they were the end point that they wanted to go to with this particular program. Right. So any children born after that are going to have inherited many of the genes and the skills and the intervention genes that they've inherited from their parent and their grandparent. And then by then, hopefully, the world will have changed.
Yeah. I've got a couple of questions here. So
coming in, will be choosing to come into that new environment.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
This program had a beginning and has an end in terms of the involvement with the ETs. After that, the incarnations will be those wanting to come in at this time to the planet as it will be in that time.
A new world. So Angela says here, what exactly does it mean to be a dual soul? How would one know if they're a dual soul? How does this play into the concept of oneness and all imitating form of oneness, infinite source?
Well, the dual soul is a part of this program. So I'm talking about how there's a beginning point and an end point for the involvement with the ETs, with souls coming into the planet at that time. And it's these three waves are that program, and all of the education programs that are part of that agenda. So the dual soul is people like myself and others who have, many others, who have had this been asked when we were about to incarnate into a life, been asked, do you want this add-on? Will you be happy with this add-on to this life? And this add-on to this life is that you will you'll be part of this agenda, part of these three waves. You'll have specific things to do. If you want that, that's fine. We'll look into that with you now. But if you don't, well, then you can just incarnate as Suzy Hansen and lead a normal life. But if you want this add-on and you accept it, then this is what you're accepting that you're going to be a part of. And that for some of the second waivers and the third waivers is this dual soul thing. And I will be writing about this in depth in the book that I'm working on now, which is a step forward to explain more of what is taking place with the three waves.
Oh, beautiful. What's the name of the book, Suzy?
It involves you as a soul, as a ball of light, accepting a spark of consciousness from an ET or from the ET. So I have seen a ball of light accepting that on a craft, accepting that consciousness. So there was like this electrical activity that went on with the ball of light where this other spark of electricity, if you can put it that way, I'm not a scientist, but that's what it looked like, merging into that consciousness, so that there are times when you are working in your life where you are able to tap into that consciousness, tap into something else and gain some guidance or information. And you are also able to elevate your awareness very quickly when you go on a craft. If you're born with this blended soul, this dual soul that has the two consciousnesses joined, when you go on craft, you elevate your awareness much more quickly, and you are put into certain programs where that consciousness is developed. So, for example, I've flown a scout craft and done other forms of activities on craft that involve that ability to tap into the greys and tap into their technology, and it's using that awareness, if I can put it that way.
I know, you have so much fun up there. I'm so envious. I'm like, I wish I could go up, or if I do go up, I wish I could remember. I have no memory of such things, so I don't know if I'm doing it or not. But, some of the experiences you've had on craft are amazing, which I'm going to get into in a minute. But just going back to the dual soul, Kat says, hello, goddesses, excited to catch you live, so appreciate and respect Suzy. And it's like we're incarnate into like physical realities, but ETs are in their own physical reality. So even though we could be in an astral form or a light body form, we're still having a physical reality, even though to us humans we would call it a spiritual reality, a spiritual experience. But to them it's just all part of their physical reality. So this dual soul connection, this melding of consciousness, if you like, is still beyond what our human minds sort of understand, but is still a physical life experience as the spirit of us is witnessing our souls incarnate in different lives, right? Yeah.
I think that we, as humans, many of us have those moments where we have our consciousness mix with someone else. And I think of the simple activity where sometimes you think, oh, I must ring my sister-in-law, and then within seconds the phone rings and it's your sister-in-law.
Yeah.
So, has she picked up on your wave or have you picked up on hers? It doesn't matter, but in that moment, in those moments of time, there's been a blending of the consciousness where you've each got the message. So I think that we do this naturally, but some people think it's a bit spooky and I don't want to go there. In the same way as some people are able to communicate with the souls of the dead, ghosts or whatever you like to call them, spirits. That's a blending of that consciousness again. It's reaching out and being able to merge and get that message and converse. So we do have this capability. It's just that our attitudes towards it need to change, and we need to be seeing it as something normal and acceptable that some of us and many of us do.
Exactly.
And that's the first step. Being taken on board craft from a child, you're put into situations as a very young child where you're just there in this large room with other ET children and human children, and you do what everyone here on Earth does at placenta or kindergarten. You begin to communicate with each other, even if you can't talk properly yet. You're still banging around toys and communicating, and that's what happens there as well. So you're trained from early childhood to understand and access this
telepathic
this consciousness. Yes,
telepathic communication. Yeah, because I think it's only humans that are communicating verbally. I think most other forms of life in the universe communicate telepathically. Look, I read in the Seth books many years ago, and I've said this many times on the show, that he said channeled information from the 60s through a woman called Jane Roberts. Seth said, or that group soul that gave their name as Seth said, that we are, as humans, all communicating telepathically. We're just not aware of it. And he said,
Absolutely.
you could not drive on your roads if you weren't communicating telepathically. So, you know, telepathy is not something that we have to learn. Telepathy is just something that we have to become aware of, that we're doing already. Recognize it. Yeah, that will recognize that you're doing it. And for the most part, we're so caught up with our daily drama that we're not even thinking about that. But it is happening all the time. And then we, like you say, we have experiences where we go, oh, I knew you were going to ring, or, you know, like there's that synchronicity or whatever. And I was just thinking about you. I knew you were going to ring. So, yeah, we're all doing it all the time anyway. So really the expansion of consciousness is the expansion of an awareness of who we are. Yeah.
Yes. But also another point I'd like to make is often on the craft they drilled into us that that we were also humans, and that we chose to live a life as a human. And I think that this is great because it keeps the feet on the ground. And, you know, I know that there's a lot of people who live very much in the spiritual mind and the spiritual head, you know, whatever. But you've got to live your life as well as a human, because that's part of why you're here. You're not here to be a spiritual guru, so to speak, unless you're a very particular guru who's here for that purpose and that purpose only. But in our daily lives, we have to be humans and aspire to be good ones, good humans.
Yeah. You're not here to be a spiritual guru, unless you are here to be a spiritual guru. Some people are here to be spiritual gurus. Okay, so there's no questions. Any questions? Kat, have you got any questions? There's a bit of a delay. Alison said, this is fascinating. I could take this kind of stuff all day. I hope we have our acts together by the end of the third wave. She's got this little emoji. Well, but there are, here we go, Kathleen, communicating vibrationally constantly. Thanks for the conversation. Yeah, we all are communicating vibrationally constantly, and just be more aware of how you are communicating. You know, I think that you were talking about animals before. I think that a way of understanding that we're communicating vibrationally with people, or telepathically with beings, let's not call them people, is our animal kingdom. We're communicating a non-verbal communication with them, even though we do talk to the cat. Like I always say, hi, how you going? But there is this telepathic communication going on between us and our animals anyway. And obviously babies. Oh, Kat says, my guides told me it wasn't for me to come back up to them, but for me to, what is that? But for me to anchor them here. Ah, that's what he says. My guides told me it wasn't for me to go up to them, but for me to anchor them here. So I guess you're talking about them as in that spiritual awareness. Again, not a question, but just a statement. Why do ETs take the memories away of being on craft? Now, that's a good question, Wendy. On being on craft, I personally feel I have no contacts with ETs, but you might. So why do they do that? Why do they take our memories away if they do?
Well, like I just said, you know, we have to lead our life, and I think there's a state of readiness. That's a word I use a lot in my speeches, is readiness, as applied to the planet, as applied to humanity and individuals. And I think that in the early days for the abductees and experiencers, it was quite tough because people weren't as open towards the subject as they are now worldwide. And there weren't as many people involved in it. So, you know, if you stuck your head out, you were likely to get it chopped off. And I know that some abductees in New Zealand here went very public in the early days, back in the late 80s and 90s, and they suffered terribly for it, ridicule from the public and the media, etc. And they've become virtual recluses,
Right.
you know, caring for the environment but not wishing to be part of humanity anymore.
Yeah.
So I think that they have had to be very careful with those early contacts throughout our lives, that we weren't too frightened, but then many people have been, because they've slipped out of the altered state that they put us in to protect us, and sometimes just simply to move us quickly because they're on a time schedule at that time, taking people on board craft. They protect us. They also look at our readiness in terms of being able to carry on our tasks if we go understand too much too soon. So I'd like to just quickly outline two things that I experienced there. The first one was I was asked shortly after I'd come out of the closet and talked to a veteran UFO researcher here in New Zealand, Harvey Cook. Harvey was going to go on a radio program about New Zealand UFO sightings. And he asked me if I would go on a program with him and talk about my contact. And I said, no, definitely not. I'm not ready for that. And he persisted and said, it'll be fine. You know, they won't use your name. It'll just be your voice, etc. And I felt quite pressured to do it because for a variety of reasons, feeling a sense of loyalty to him, etc. So I kind of reluctantly said, okay. And within the first few seconds of interviewing me, the interviewer basically shouted down the microphone at me, ridiculed me, basically, in not so many words, called me a liar and cut me off. And that affected me deeply because I'd finally come out to talk about this and that, and I was slammed down. And this is the kind of thing they have been trying, the ETs have been trying to prevent that sort of thing happening. But it was a big learning thing for me. It turned out to be a great learning thing for me. And I was quiet for a very long time after that until I felt ready. Not anyone else felt I was ready until I felt ready. So that's one point. And the other one I've simply forgotten.
Oh, well, it'll come back to you. Look, I absolutely agree. I think that's really changing. I'm watching the mainstream media grapple with a subject such as UFO, and it's really shifted, especially over the last few years. You know, David Icke has come out to Australia a few times. They banned him. They wouldn't let him come out like last time because he was going to talk about anti-V. I won't talk about it on the live. And he was so defensive inside the mainstream media because he had been ridiculed so many times on mainstream media that the last time he came out, he actually had an interviewer that was genuinely interested in what he had to say, but he was like one of the team, you know, sort of laughing and giggling at him for talking about ETs or UFOs or whatever. But you could see the genuine questions that he was asking David Icke. But poor David Icke was so in his defensiveness, he's totally, you know, effed up the interview because he just started kind of being in that defensive mode. And I was sort of watching this show, feeling compassion for both of them, but also watching this interviewer, you know, be genuinely interested in this topic and doing it publicly while still trying to save face with his peers. But there's been huge shifts in the mainstream media around the subject of UFOs or ETs. Look, I don't know if you could go on morning breakfast radio or television and talk about your experiences on craft, but you could definitely talk about seeing UFOs or even telepathically communicating with them, I suspect.
Yes. And so now I've remembered, so I'll just...
Yeah, cool. There you go. Here you would. I say
for the early experiences and abductees, there was really no one to talk to. There was perhaps in the States, you had, you know, John Mack and others. Yeah. But certainly in New Zealand, there were not many people that you could talk to. And so now in the situation that I feel is happening now, where more people are coming out and wanting to talk about their experiences, they have the advantage of many experiencers like myself, and you've got Cheryl Gotchell in Australia who you can talk to about your own experiences, who've already been that far along the road and can assist you. And I think that's a great thing. But the other thing in answer to that question is that that readiness that I talked about, I remember an experience where I slipped out of the altered state that I'd been put into, and I was standing in the hallway with 3 greys. And when they realised, because I started communicating with them and questioning what they were doing and whether or not my youngest son was going to be left on his own in the house, they then realised that I had slipped out of the state and I was perfectly okay in their company. And they communicated to each other and said, she is ready to remember more now.
Ah.
So from that point on, I started to have more and more extensive memory, conscious memory of what I'd been doing on the craft. And that was meant to be to assist me along the way in terms of eventually writing a book and talking publicly about my experiences. So they allowed me by the state that they would put you in when they're moving you, etc., or whether they just didn't put you in it, or they put you into it lightly. So I hope that has answered the lady's questions.
Yeah, well, we're getting a few thumbs up. Absolutely. So the reason that they wipe our memory is really for our own protection. You know, you said that so we can lead up until the time where we're supposed to remember, we can lead normal human lives and think we're normal humans and get on with what it is to be human until that time of activation when we need to remember. Alison said, is there a general message of what the best thing I can do right now to help us, humanity, I suspect she's talking about, is the best thing for me to just continue raising my vibration, meditation, and practicing love? Sounds good, Alison.
Yep, that sounds pretty good to me. In many speeches I get asked that question, and there may be some people who are disappointed with my answer because I keep it simple and I say, be a good person, lead a good life, and help others, be compassionate, and get your survival kit together.
How do you mean survival kit?
Well, I think we're going to have more and more extreme weather and earth changes, and particularly coming from a country like New Zealand where we have volcanic eruptions and quite large earthquakes with a lot of damage and loss of life. We have a civil defence kit that we're supposed to have ready at all times, food supplies, water, etc. But I think that this is something that everybody should look at, where they would go if certain things happened and how they would deal with it. Have they got a simple first aid kit? Have they got some food put aside that will help them survive until such time as they could access more food? Have they got a vegetable garden, etc.? But all of those basic things that a lot of Kiwis and Aussies at the moment are guessing are getting back to. It's some of the basic things that are survival aspects. So really it's a matter of, yes, continue raising your vibe, and by being a good person and leading a good life, you're doing that anyway. And be careful what you project at all times.
Absolutely. Be careful what you think. You know, manage your mood. You monitor your thoughts through managing your mood. When you're feeling down or depressed, just tell yourself, I could change this. I can change this. I can focus differently and think in a better way. Look, I think that one of the things that is happening in our world that is really activating or accelerating people's desires is to come together in community and to be there to support each other, because so many of us, like me, live alone at home. And I think that as the proverbial shift does ramp up over the next few years, living in community and helping each other and growing vegetables and maybe getting off the grid and stuff like that, even if you do live in the city, having a place to go in the country where you can grow vegetables is really important. So maybe the thing to do would be to start community, start getting involved in people that have community, start looking at the community places on the land where people are growing vegetables. And yes,
and just environmental groups assisting, getting involved with animals and nature and how we can conserve it in your area. What can you do in your area?
Yeah,
not only to help other people but to help nature as well.
Yeah. Well, we were only supposed to go for about an hour, but we're going for about an hour and 20 minutes. We had a few tech problems. Nobody else got any questions? There doesn't appear to be any more questions, just a bit of thank yous, lots of thank yous. And that was a great question. Thank you, everybody that's been asking your questions. It's been great to get your feedback and your questions. And anything else you want to say? Look, I was going to go into that experience. You know, you're one of the people that I've had on the show that really rocked my world. I've got some favorites on my website. I've got my favorites that I've spoken to. I've been speaking to people for over 25 years about all sorts of different subjects, spirituality and off-world experiences and psychic ability and healing and all sorts of things, law of attraction. And the experience that really rocked my world with you was that experience you had on craft, which I've gone over many times, where the ETs were trying to teach the humans and the hybrids how to dematerialize their physical form. Do you want to just go over that again? Because I love that experience. I just think it's amazing.
Yeah. And that's a chapter I called A Glimpse of Cosmic Culture. It wasn't hybrids, it was a group of humans, there were 8 of us, and we were taken into a room, and we were told that to expect the room to become unusual. So we were taken in, and they didn't actually shut a door or anything like that. But once you got into the room and you looked out through the opening, it was like looking through a drop of water. So everything became quite distorted, and yet the air in the room seemed quite normal. And the greys who were there, and there were also some other species, there was a mantis as well, they said, okay, prepare for the room to alter now because we have this ability. And we saw what we had seen before, or some of us had seen before, and it was the walls began to recede. So the space became much bigger than it was when we walked into it. It was like a bedroom size, and then it became like a small hall. And we have seen this happen with craft, where you're going to be taken on board a craft and it looks really tiny and you think, how are we going to fit in there? But when you stoop and go through the opening, it opens out into a large craft. I don't know how they do that, but Dr. Sheldon and I have talked about that at length. Anyway, once the room had expanded, we were told that they were going to show us how they have their enjoyment, or how they have pleasure or recreation. And they began to disintegrate their bodies. So we saw they coloured, using consciousness, coloured the whatever was coming off their bodies, like atoms or whatever, are breaking down into tiny particles like sand. And this just drifted up towards the ceiling of this room. And they asked each of us to, in our mind, picture an image of something we wanted them to transform into. So someone chose a bee, and someone chose a ruler and a pencil and a lotus flower. And so then all of this sand-like substance formed into these shapes in the air around us. And while this was happening, what I referred to as a thought voice, so there's a voice coming to us, or message coming to us through consciousness from this grey, even though his physical body had disintegrated, his consciousness was still talking to us and was encouraging us to try to let ourselves go, to just relax and let ourselves go, and to see if any of us could actually emulate this. Well, none of us could. We couldn't let the human body go to that extent in that room and in that environment. But it had such a deeply emotional effect on us, the feeling of love, absolute pure love that we were getting from these disintegrated physical bodies, and their consciousness that was in the room with us. Was so overwhelming and so great that we had tears streaming down our faces, and felt joy such as I have never felt at any other time in my life. In fact, my perception of joy was radically altered to think that we as humans don't even know what it really is, to that extent of being so joined with the consciousness of these other beings in that loving environment that it invoked huge emotions within you. And then they came back into their form again, and there was no disappointment that we couldn't do it or couldn't let ourselves do it. It was just, well, we've shared this experience. We wanted you to understand what we are capable of. And they made it very clear that in the future, humans would be able to do this. This is where we're heading.
Absolutely.
Into this pure consciousness state that can take on a physical form at will, however it might want it. And on another occasion, they showed us these beautiful light beings in a hallway, and they then slowly transformed back to the bodies of greys. And they said, this is how we operate in other dimensions. This is our form. So really, when I hear a lot of the competitiveness that does go on in the UFO field and the contact field, and you hear some experiencers will say, well, you know, I have contact with light beings, but you have contact with greys, they're 3D minor, it's such and such a D. I just smile to myself because
the 158th dimension.
Yeah, they just haven't got understood, even as experiencers, that this is possible for us all.
Yeah.
And that consciousness is the constant element.
Look, what I love about this story too is when you were working with Dr. Rudy Shields, who was a neurophysicist or a physicist, astrophysicist, thank you. He had asked you to send him some of your work, and you sent him sort of the pretty like safe stuff, and then he said, "Now send me some juicy stuff. Send me stuff that you think I'd think was totally, you know, couldn't be possible." And you sent him that experience, and he said, from a quantum perspective, I totally understand how that's possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I was shocked. You know, I was waiting a couple of days to get the reply, thinking, oh gosh, what's he going to say? He's going to say, no, I don't want anything to do with this manuscript. And he came back. I sent him 3, and he came back and said, actually, those are the ones I understand the most. Right. The content in them is really dense in terms of understanding of physics. It's full of a density of information that I didn't understand as a layperson. I'm not a scientist.
Yeah.
I could feel the emotions, but I couldn't recognize the quantum or physicist.
Well, you know, quantum understands that everything is energy and information vibrating. And so, you know, obviously the ETs understand that too. Look, on many shows we've discussed that what we perceive as woo-woo or spiritual or mystical to the extra dimensionals, extraterrestrials, it's just science. You know, it's like I can dematerialize and rematerialize my body because it's science, and I know how to raise my vibe. So we talk about raising our vibe as humans, and that experience illustrates the love and the joy that you experienced. We haven't even tapped into that mostly as humans. You know, some maybe orgasm kind of can get you there or ayahuasca or something, or meditative states where you're in bliss and ecstasy, but we kind of operate in such a dense vibe, and we call that happiness, that we really don't know what true joy and true happiness and true bliss is, but they do. It's so exciting. There's a couple of other questions here. Kat says, has Suzy's ET family talked to her about our ascension, New Earth, 5D Earth, recently? How do they perceive our ascension process? Well, we spoke a little bit about that, Kat. They think that we're stagnant water.
Well, funnily enough, I've never had them use the word ascension or 5D or any of those words. Those are very much our words.
Right.
They talk about raising our spirituality in order to be able to meet with them on an equal footing, or it won't ever be a real equal footing, but it'll be more equal in it certainly than it is now. And so this really relates to disclosure in a sense that a lot of people want disclosure to be now or yesterday, but I have always maintained, as the ETs have always said, that it takes time, and one of the factors that needs to be raised is our spirituality. As that raises, our consciousness expands, and not until that happens will we be able to really meet them face to face as a civilization, because we will be bowled over by the power of their consciousness. So experiencers and abductees who've been going on craft from babies and from prior to incarnation as a soul have grown up with this, and we recognize it and we are taught to deal with it. Our consciousness expands on craft, such as it doesn't when we're down here. We can't do the things down here we can do up there, because we are not enhanced by that soup of consciousness and oneness that we are in on the craft that supports you. So until we can reach even somewhere close to that, we're not going to be ascending anywhere. And maybe our ascension is just that, is the elevation of spirituality and the expansion of consciousness.
Yeah. It's interesting.
And the new earth, they've never talked about a new earth. I know a lot of people talk about this, and there are some researchers who push the concept. But from my perspective, the new earth is what we will make of the planet when changes have taken place that shake us so much to our core that we change the way we are.
Absolutely. We've got a way to go. We're just at the beginning of this. I mean, there are so many spiritual people out there talking about what's possible, but we've got a long way to go to actually get there. But we can put our focus there. We can put our focus on what is possible instead of what is. So the majority of humans tend to use their very powerful consciousness and ability to focus and perceive as they put their attention on what is instead of what is possible. So what I try to do with these shows and talking to amazing people like you is to bring that what is possible, and like, let's put our powerful attention on what's possible, and it will, and you know, draw us into that.
Manifest that. Very good, Karen.
Yeah.
What you've said is very good.
Yes, and oh, look, it's always a joy to speak with you. I don't think there's too many more questions, as everyone's sort of saying hello, waving, people joining and things. Look, Suzy, you're such an amazing being. We were having a chat just at the beginning of this that somebody said that you look like a school teacher, and they were kind of insulting you maybe because of the short hair and glasses. I've got my school teacher glasses on today. But I want to say to people, I have met Suzy in the physical. And the thing that astounded me about you was behind those rimmed glasses are the most unbelievable eyes I have ever encountered. You know, you might look like a middle-aged school teacher with glasses and short hair, but when you look into your eyes, there is so much light and beauty behind those glasses that you've got on. And I kind of saw, when I met you, your eyes just like, wow, look at those eyes. So for people that can't see her behind her glasses, she's got the most beautiful eyes you've ever seen, full of light. I'm not
really ashamed of being a school teacher.
Oh, look, school teachers rock. I love our school teachers. You know, they're looking after our children. That's important. What does Kat say here? Yes, focus on what's possible and anchor that future into the present moment. Agreed. Oh, thank you so much. Barbara just joined. We're gonna say goodbye now. We've been talking for about an hour and a half, and you probably want to go and have lunch. I think it's lunch over there in New Zealand. So it's been a joy and a blessing and a wonder. It always has. I'd love to get you back out to Australia and talk to a younger crowd than you normally talk to when you're out here, but we can't do that at the moment. I've been talking about that for a couple of years now, but we'll get it together one day, because I think the young ones would love to hear what you have to say, because a lot of the time people kind of ask you to talk about spotting lights in the sky and research and stuff like that. And there's so much more to you than that. You've got this amazing knowledge. So thanks again, Suzy.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you to the listeners. Thank you very much for those who asked questions.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks to everyone that joined on the Facebook Live. We had about, 20 odd people jumping off and on. And we'll catch you again soon. I think I'm going to get Mary Rodwell on next week, maybe to do a Facebook Live to see what she's up to. So, okay. Big love.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen. Bye.